former Vice President Joe Biden's message seems to be an effort to unify the country. Some members of the Democratic Party are not happy with the way that he's been distancing himself from Senator Bernie Sanders.
In her recent piece, progressives to Biden, stop dragging Bernie, he's saving your ass. Daily Beast reporter Hanna Trudo explains why many progressives believe that Biden is hanging Sanders out to dry. And Hanna joins us today to weigh in on this, as well as the doings from the vice presidential debate last night. Great to see you, Hanna.
Great to see you guys.
Just take us through this piece and what the sort of dynamics are that you revealed.
Sure. So in Joe Biden's recent town hall the other night, he was speaking in Miami to an audience of ostensibly undecided voters. And basically, he made a line towards the end of the debate to a voter who asked about the GOP sort of Cuban and Venezuelan targeted attacks about socialism and communism that obviously in South Florida can potentially be quite effective. And so in answering that question, he chose to say, I'm not a socialist. I'm the farthest thing from a socialist. And I'm paraphrasing, but I beat a socialist, or I think he actually said the socialists in the Democratic primary. And so he kind of went out of his way to give an answer that just left no question in anybody's mind about where he stands. And of course, for people who have followed the Democratic primary, who have watched Biden's career unfold over several decades, they know that that's not where he stands anyway. But so I had a feeling that, that there might be something brewing in Bernie Sanders' orbit to kind of address, basically see if there was any outrage or just ill will towards that sentiment. It wasn't the first time he had said it. He's been saying it relatively frequently on the campaign trail. I will say only when he's asked to kind of clarify if that's where he stands or how he's going to fend off those attacks. But so I texted a former senior Sanders aide pretty instantly after that happened. And the response that I got was basically what I wrote in the piece, which was essentially, not only is this sort of arrogant and foolish, but it's also really unnecessary. And so it's alienating, in this person's view, who's close to the senator, it's alienating sort of the movement that they had built up. And it also goes against, at least messaging wise, the pledge that Joe Biden had been offering to kind of unite not just the country, but the various factions of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, expand a little bit on that, Hanna, which is that, do they feel that it could be a major electoral liability? Are they really just more upset that he's calling them out by name? Like, what is that standard kind of that they're setting? But also, how does the Biden camp feel? Are they just like, hey, we don't really care? They all said they're going to vote for us anyway.
Yeah, so I think it depends kind of who you talk to. I think among at least the response that I saw, this is again unscientific on Twitter, but the response that I got mostly on Twitter, even from some Bernie supporters, was that, they understand why this might be a tactical approach, especially in places like South Florida, to win the election. But it's not necessarily one that's, a good faith messaging effort. So I think I talked to a couple more people who said, this is in Sanders' world broadly, who said, I don't care really about what Joe Biden says, but I care about the fact that the Democratic Party at large keeps kind of pushing progressives off the cliff while they go out of their way to embrace Republicans. In particular, Joe Biden's campaign has been doing that very, very overtly and very tactically for many months now. So I think that's the feeling. The Biden campaign basically, they didn't comment on the record. I did happen to see that Bernie was asked about whether he was offended by a remark that Trump made sort of after the debate performance, criticizing him and saying, are you offended by his decision to call you a socialist? This was during the last debate. And this was on The View, and Bernie basically said, no, this was over universal health care. We don't agree, and it's not a lie that it's not a secret that we don't agree, rather. So there's a lot of sort of different views as it is in Bernie world over that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess that's my thing is, like, on the one hand, I picked right at that town hall, which wasn't that interesting by and large, and the audio quality was really crappy and all of those things. But yeah, I picked up on the fact, and this is consistent throughout the Biden campaign, of like, he gets asked about Republicans, and he's like, I respect Republicans, and I can work with Republicans, and I don't question their motives, and after Trump's gone, we're going to be able to work together. So he goes out of his way to be super nice to, like, Republicans and bring in John Kasich and friggin' Rick Snyder and all these people. And then he gets asked about the left, and it's basically like, screw those people. But on the other hand, I'm like, I can't blame him, because you know what? The moment he won the Democratic nomination, Bernie Sanders and every significant organization on the left is basically like, well, we don't love everything, but we're going to vote for you. So why does it, I mean, so he doesn't feel any pressure to have to say anything nice about them. They've all already pledged their support. And look, it's mostly reflected in the polls. There isn't a lot of third-party interest this time around on the left.
And the other thing that I think is interesting about that is that, you know, this senior former aide pointed out to me that he is working this time around, and you know, they argued also last time around to get Biden elected, doing these rallies. He had his first in-person rally in New Hampshire the other day, but he's been doing all these virtual rallies over the past couple of weeks and months. And so that, I think, added a layer of just sort of ill will or just bad feelings towards him taking that approach, when clearly last time, you remember, Hillary Clinton's campaign took issue with the fact that they didn't think that Sanders went out of his way, you know, as much as possible to get her elected. Obviously, the left disagreed with that, and Sanders himself disagreed with that. But we're seeing that this time, where he is, you know, pounding the pavement in a very, very overt way. He endorsed, like you said, you know, he endorsed Biden early on. And so I think that that's kind of an additional slap in the face to some people, especially in this one person's view that I talked to at length about it.
I think the sense is like Bernie's out there basically like risking his life to do these rallies for Joe, and this is the thanks that he gets. What is the view from these leaders and organizations that you're speaking to about how realistic it is to push Joe once he's in office to the left? I mean, I'll just be frank. I'm super skeptical that that's going to be particularly successful, because I think he feels like he won the primary by actively, you know, taking an oppositional position to the left, and he's effectively going to win the general, it looks like, doing the same thing. So I don't think he feels like he needs the left or owes them anything. But is there an optimism within that movement that, you know, once he's in office, then we're going to be tough on him, then we're going to call him out? How do you see those things playing out?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think that that's something worth following in the final couple weeks of the campaign here, because one thing that I have noticed is that those task forces that were set up, you know, between the Sanders camp and the Biden camp to kind of address some of the big ticket issues that would come up when and if he takes the White House. I haven't seen much movement from them. So it's basically been, you know, that when they first were announced, there were some major, you know, progressive icons on a whole roster of issues, but I haven't seen any movement behind the scenes necessarily, nor have I seen an active push from Biden world in particular to kind of say, you know, hey, here's what's going on with the task forces that we set up. So I look at those only in the sense that they're very issue specific, and so they can, you know, potentially foreshadow what we might expect to see in a Biden administration, hypothetically. But the other part that I think is worth keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks is just the talk about who is being floated for cabinet positions. You know, after the VP announcement, I think there's been questions about where is there a role for Elizabeth Warren. You know, that's still a line to keep an eye on. She's going to be campaigning for him this weekend in New Hampshire as well. So I think, you know, there's a lot of sort of moving parts to that ongoing theme. It's more of a question to me of like, what does he do in the meantime with these task forces, with, you know, what are his advisors going to be thinking about as they move closer and closer, and as their lead, frankly, advances in the polls.
Yeah, really interesting.
Great reporting, Hannah. Great to see you.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, guys.
Still to come, COVID cases on the rise. The president received a gift from God. We're going to tell you that when Rising continues.